going to go ahead and call the Ridgefield Planning Commission meeting to order. If we could all please stand for the flag salute and the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next, roll call, please.
Commissioner Glavin.
Present.
Commissioner Molinex.
Present.
Vice Chair Amerman.
Present.
Commissioner Flynn.
Present.
Commissioner Butler.
Present.
Chair Tyler. And Commissioner Wolf.
Present. Ms. Luss, do we have any late changes to the agenda?
No late changes, thank you. But I would request that the commission excuse Chair Tyler. He requested an excused absence for outside obligations this evening.
Vice Chair, I'd like to make a motion to excuse Chair Tyler from this evening's meeting.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, so moved. Oh, my apologies. It's been a while. Vote all ayes in favor of the excused absence.
Aye.
Aye.
Next, we have our first public comment period. Anyone requesting to speak to the commission regarding any item not subject to a specific public hearing during this meeting may come forward at this time. Please state your name and limit comments to 3 minutes. Written comments may be submitted to the clerk prior to the meeting. Anyone, if you have provided notice in advance to speak during the public comment period, please use the raise hand feature. The clerk will send you permission to unmute your microphone so you'll be able to make your comments. For controls over the phone, press *9 for raise hand and press *6 to mute, unmute. Do we have any comments?
Good evening. Hi, my name is Heather Gordon. I live at 627 South 25th Place. I'm here representing myself, but also as an actively engaged member of the Ridgefield community. I lead the Native Plant Advocates team for the Ridgefield Garden Club, and I serve on and am chair of the city's Roundabout Committee. I'm here to advocate for Ridgefield's native trees, shrubs, and plants. They have been here supporting our pollinators, wildlife, and watershed for millennia. They are responsible for erosion control, filtering our air, providing shade and cooling in summer. They are also beautiful. I know the Planning Commission has had discussions surrounding the importance of native trees and plants in our city, and I just want to reinforce how critical it is that we protect these local resources. I know, for example, that there are development projects where the commission and city have to decide whether to preserve existing trees, shrubs, and plants or allow developers to replace them after they are done. I hope the commission moves in the direction of having developers be required to adjust their plans around these existing and amazing resources. These native plant and tree resources are working for us in Ridgefield right now in real time. They are filtering pollutants, providing erosion control, as I said, and hosting insect and bird life critical to the ecosystem health of our community. Native trees and plants take years to come back after being taken down. This is not a 10-year time frame, even a 20-year time frame. We're talking about an 80 to 100-year time frame in the best of conditions, which brings me to the next issue. Developers are not plant people. They are building people. The landscaping they promise and deliver is greatly lacking and doesn't establish well in many cases. As someone who lives across from the Ridgefield Heights development, I can tell you there's been several disasters. There were a huge stand of 24 Douglas firs that were supposed to remain as part of that subdivision, but they were cut down. In its place is a draining pond that then drained into G Creek, creating all sorts of environmental issues that they've been trying to address for 3 years. There's dirt being piled to make high-sitting houses. One of those hills, piles of dirt, is now covered with white plastic because they can't figure out what to do with it because the dirt's sliding down. Do I really only have 28 seconds left? Wow, okay. I just want to stress that this plant life is absolutely essential, and it's documented how much decline there is in our insect and bird populations. And if we don't do something, we're destroying what we have, and human life will be not able to survive. So thank you for thinking about not just restarting nature, but continuing the nature we have. Thank you.
Do we have any further public comments? On anyone on Zoom or on a phone call waiting? Looks like we have nothing further, so we'll go ahead and close this first public comment period. Next, we have the consent agenda. Can I call for a motion to approve the agenda from our last meeting?
So moved.
Second the motion.
Can I have a vote of ayes for all that approve?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes. Next, we have our business. The first order of business is the Envision Ridgefield 2045, and I'll hand it over to you, Ms. Lust.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Our first piece of business tonight is a presentation and then discussion on the draft goals and policies for the Parks and Recreation element of the Comprehensive Plan Update, otherwise known as Envision Ridgefield 2045. This is our 20-year growth management plan that we've been working on over the past couple years. And as with other elements of the plan, we are bringing forth to Planning Commission and next to City Council for review some draft goals and policies related to Parks and Recreation. So I'll note that I'm not requesting any recommendations or action this evening. This is just a first touch on this draft. Do welcome any feedback from the commissioners on goals and policies drafted here that we can incorporate into our next draft. I will also note that the intent here of this is to be a policy level discussion. I know probably a lot of people in this room have different questions about different parks projects. That's a separate conversation, so I'd ask that you hold those questions. You're welcome to email them to us later, and we'll get back to you. But for the purpose of this evening and out of respect for everyone's time, I really want to focus on the goals and policies. I have with me here this evening Corey Crownhart, who is our parks manager. And with that, I'll go ahead and get into the presentation. So the first thing I want to talk about, and I'll pass it over to Corey here in a sec, is just the relationship between the different parks planning documents that Ridgefield has. So as I mentioned, the Parks and Recreation element is a required component of our comprehensive plan, and it's a little unique as an element of that plan, though, because so much of our parks planning and implementation work lives in different documents that the city relies upon and that the city is actively working to update. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead. Trina, can you flip ahead, please? Oh.
We're done. Wonderful.
We're done. Here, I'm going. All right, so the Parks and Rec element of the comp plan is one of a suite of documents guiding Parks and Recreation planning and implementation. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Crownhart to talk a bit about the relationship between those documents and the work he has done lately supporting their updates.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Les, and thank you, Commission, for having me come out and spend some time with you. I'm typically with the Parks Board, so being with the other commission is a joy. With that, it's always a pleasure to be talking about parks, and so let's talk a little bit about the documents that help support the development of Parks and Recreation within the city of Ridgefield. Continually, we've seen that in community surveys, Parks and Recreation is a high priority for citizens, and so because of that, we try and put a lot of effort into the work that we're doing for Parks and Recreation. As Ms. Luss has already articulated, the Parks and Recreation element of the comprehensive plan is required as part of our overall work, but there are supporting documents that help drive the execution of that policy direction from Council and, of course, Planning Commission. The first of those documents is what's called the Parks, Recreation, and Open Spaces Plan, or the PROS Plan. The PROS Plan is essentially a gap analysis and overview of what are the current assets that we have within Parks and Recreation, and what are the opportunities that Parks and Recreation could go after over the next 6 or 7 years. That work helps dictate what types of parks we go for, what types of amenities we strive to have within our parks. Say, a bike pump track out at Boyce Park was part of the 2020 PROS plan that was passed by Council. It also looks at potential recreation programs that could be implemented within the city. So currently, our most recent PROS plan was created in 2020. We will be updating the PROS plan in 2026 through the Parks Board and then through Council. It's really kind of the Bible of the work that I help drive for the city is coming from that document. Second up is the Parks Capital Facilities Plan. And this is a list of potential projects that Council has deemed to be priorities for us to strive to shoot for over the next 6 years. Now, there's always opportunities and different things that pop up for us to go after, so it's really just a rough roadmap. But it helps identify things such as where might we want to place parks and what do we want to emphasize. The City Council just passed the Parks Capital Facilities Plan last month. Some of the elements that it is calling for is an addition of another community park on the east side of the freeway, as well as one in the Carty Road sub-area, or subdevelopment area, right? Wonderful. So getting some new community parks in those spaces because we know there's going to be growth there over the next few years. Finally, we have our Engineering Standards Volume 3, which I'm proud to say passed last month as well. The engineering standards are similar to the Volume 1 Engineering Standards, which is our infrastructure, construction, and design code, as well as the Volume 1, which is our building code. Volume 3 is specifically for parks, trails, and recreation assets. So, what I call a trail or you call a trail may not necessarily be what a contractor or a developer calls a trail. So, these standards help specify what are the specifications for that trail, such as the grade, the cross slope, the running slope, and to what level of accessibility do they need to be designed. As interesting as it may be, many of you have probably hiked the trail at Beacon Rock at the Columbia Gorge. While that does not seem to be a accessible trail, it actually does fall within the trail, the U.S. Forest Service trail accessibility guidelines. The reason being is if you were to make it a fully accessible trail for every user, you would destroy the very nature that we're going to see. So our standards that were just passed reference that our trails need to fall into either 2 categories, being multimodal trails, or 2, being recreational. Our multimodal trails have to follow Washington State Department of Transportation shared use path standards, which can be compared to, say, Salmon Creek or Burnt Bridge Creek in Vancouver. Or, if they're a recreation trail, they can follow U.S. Forest Service standards, which encompasses every type of trail you can think of, from your typical hiker and pedestrian with a large class, such as a asphalt trail, maybe 6 to 10 feet wide, all the way down to single-track mountain biking, equestrian trails, and even snowmobiling trails. Granted, I don't think we're going to be doing that here. All that to say is that the engineering standards help specify what are the things that we're building in the city, and are we building them to a particular standard so that they are resilient, they're long-lasting, and they are a benefit to the community. So those are some of the documents that help take the Parks and Recreation element of the comprehensive plan and help flesh it out so we can help it come to life out into the outdoors. That was less than 5 minutes. Yes.
Thank you, Corey. I'll turn it back to you, Vice Chair, and see if the Commission has any questions for us about how those plans work together before we move into the draft goals and policies.
Thank you, Ms. Lust, and thank you for the presentation. That was fantastic. We'll go ahead and start on the far left here. Any No? Due to the fact that we haven't had much, and I know this might be bending the policy a bit, but let me put it this way. One of the things I've been continually concerned about, and I'm curious if there is any policy impact either to the success or movement of this topic or facilitation of this topic, is the trail, and I apologize for not remembering exactly what it was called, but basically the connector between downtown and just going that way on Pioneer, right, which involves the bridge and has been a big project over a long period of time. And I know a lot's been in the works, and I know this is really about policy, but I'm at least wanting to know in a context of policy and what we're trying to do is if everything's in track there.
So when we move into the policy slides, you'll see goals speaking to connectivity. And then as far as the questions to that specific project, I'm going to ask that we take that offline. We'll
No
get back
problem.
to you.
Thanks so much.
If I may add one thing to that, the capital facilities plan that was just recently passed does have a request to have a trail connectivity assessment taking place probably in 2027.
So are we now moving on to the development code amendments, Ms.
No,
Leslie?
we're going to move on to the draft goals and policies
Okay,
for
I
the
don't think I
parks
fully
element.
understood that. My apologies.
Yeah. So that was our kind of context, and now we're going to move forward. There are 3 draft goals with policies nested in each of them. Trina, can you tap forward once, please? Thank you. So the first of the 3 draft goals has to do with that trail interconnection and access. It is in, sorry, I'm on the wrong one. Never mind. The first of the goals has to do with trail development, when, where, how trails are, parks and trails are developed in our urban areas. So goal 6.1, effectively integrate parks and trails into developing urban areas. As with the other draft goals and policies we've gone through, we have the little tree icons. Those are to show areas of connection with our climate element. And of course, pretty much everything in the parks and recreation element could earn that tree icon. So we kind of focused on ones that are specifically connected to climate resiliency and greenhouse gas reduction, just as a side note. But you've had these to review in your packet, so I would like to turn it back once again to the commission to see if you have any feedback, questions, comments on the policies here in goal 6.1, which have to do with park and trail development. Thanks.
Go ahead and start on the right side this time if we have comments.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, when you're talking, well, the first one, 6.1, the acquisition, specifically thinking about like the development. Actually, it's 6.1.2. How does that currently, if you could explain to me, Mr. Crownhart, how does that currently work? When a development comes in, what do they own? And what gets transferred to the city? What is responsibility of the homeowners association?
Yeah, so there are a couple things in play when a development comes in, and we do look to that project to provide parks and open space. So the first part of it is on the private side, residential developments are required to set aside 25% for open space, and a portion of that has to be active open space. So some of it can just be critical areas, some of it has to be usable. That includes parks and trails. And that becomes privately owned and maintained, although accessible to the public. So those are your neighborhood parks that are owned and maintained by HOAs, but they're not gated off. Now, the other side is publicly owned parks, and those are ones that are identified on that Parks and Recreation Capital Facilities Plan. So they're identified on a map, and they're put on a priority list for funding. And so when development occurs in the vicinity of where one of those parks is shown on the Capital Facilities Plan map, then that land is required to in the development process be dedicated to the city for city ownership.
A good example of that would be Paradise Point Park, that is currently in development right now, as well as I think Sanderling Park is going to be having a park that's part of their development as well.
So what are the requirements, or like what are we asking the developers to provide? Because I know a lot of them have like the playground structure. Is that like the minimum? Could it be just open space? Like, does it have to be a playground structure? I mean, and I'm thinking about the community that I reside in, and I don't think that open space is large enough for our community. So I think another question would be, is that minimum a set minimum? Where did that percentage, the 25%, come from? Is it something that, just questions around that when I'm looking at my community.
Sure, the 25% is pretty much the maximum we can get away with legally without it constituting a taking of private property. So the city years ago made a policy decision to sort of maximize that opportunity. As far as amenities that get built in those parks, I think over the years the requirements of that have changed a bit and kind of culminated with the recent update to the engineering standards for parks and trails, which has pretty robust requirements for actual amenities in those parks.
Yeah, and it also specifies when they submit their plans to the city, they have to specify the classification of each of their trails, classifications of the parks, and within our standards it specifies, based on those classifications, what amenities are required. So for a community park, which is our largest parks, is community parks, neighborhood parks, and pocket parks. Community parks being the largest ones, they require to have signage at every entrance, trash cans and recycling cans by those signs. They're also required to have some sort of interpretive signage to help tell a story of that space, and they're also required to have a restroom. But neighborhood parks, slightly different. They would just require a park sign, trash cans, recycling, bike rack, those types of things. It also specifies things like if you were to have a play structure in a playground, it has to pass certified playground safety inspections at commissioning. And they are all required to have at least one park bench next to them, because there's plenty of elderly residents who are bringing their grandchildren or children to these parks, and we want to make sure that they've got a place to sit down and have the spaces. Or even requiring trash cans be next to picnic shelters. Or probably the largest one that our maintenance crew will talk about is it rains here about 6 to 9 months a year, and there are many trash cans that don't have covers or lids, which presents an operations and maintenance challenge. So we want them to be resilient for not only us, but also for the HOAs so they can take care of them.
Thank you. I also wanted to, I think it was, the last one, 6.1.4. I just wanted to highlight and thank you for bringing that up. I mean, there is, research has shown that there is such a thing as tree inequality, and that directly impacts like the lower socioeconomic families, households, and trees positively impact human health and well-being, and just provide residents the longevity to live longer, walk and exercise, and socialize outdoors. So thank you for including that.
Outside of the city partnering with developers on parks, is the city looking to acquire properties outside of partnerships with developers for like community parks?
Absolutely, there's opportunities for us to find ways to do that.
Okay.
No comments or questions at this time.
I appreciate the opinions of the commission and that we all come at things a bit different. When I think about 6.1.4, I was actually curious about its inclusion. And I'm wondering if there's anything in here that speaks to distribution by population.
Yeah, one of these in here is looking at policy 6.1.1, the first one on here, really talking about adequate acreage of parkland and miles of trail. So what is adequate? How we measure this within the parks and recreation industry is we look at national standards and national metrics. So, the National Recreation and Parks Association, I've got this data actually already pulled up for you. The national median for a city of less than 20,000 residents has about 12.6 acres per 1,000 residents. The city of Ridgefield currently has 11.08 acres per 1,000 residents, so we're actually pretty close to the national median as of right now. But there are similar standards for like how many miles of trails per resident, and that's how we measure, are we hitting that adequate amount for the city?
I think what I was getting at was 6.1.4 talks about prioritizing proximity based on vulnerable communities, and that's where I was not sure it resonates with me. And what I'm curious about is in proximity to population density. So if you have an area of the city where there's a node of high density, is there more focus on prioritizing siting of parks there versus a low density area?
We can make a note of that as a potential additional or added to a policy in here, something about location in relation to density.
Thanks.
I'm actually going to key off of that comment and just going to take it in a maybe slightly different angle. I'm kind of thinking about the reality of the up to 25% that you were talking about, but I'm looking at it from a policy and a kind of requirement standpoint. Is there anything that reflects on density in the context of, let's say, an apartment development? So you're putting an apartment development, it's especially dense. You're going to have maybe 3 times the number of people, adults, kids especially, in that area. And while there might be a set amount of space that's provided, I'm curious about anything that might guide or even require some of the details about how that space is used to serve a greater population. Like, you know, if you're, I'm not sure what that would look like, but I'm sure when looking at everything from a sitting area with benches to a playground to different things like that, that in any design along those lines, it would have a target audience that it would be serving. You know, this is how many kids could play in this space in a given amount of time. And that kind of comes to mind when thinking about 614. So I'm curious about what exists that kind of serves that topic.
So at a policy level, I think it sounds like it would be appropriate for us to craft some policy language around creating unique opportunities for parks around higher density nodes. As far as what that looks like, that becomes an implementation item in the development code.
There's also a question of different, community parks, neighborhood parks, and pocket parks serve different populations and larger areas. So community park is really something that serves the entire city, and so we expect people to commute to these spaces. Think of Abrams Park, think of Overlook Park, think of Greeley Park. Our neighborhood parks are more serving everybody kind of within that 1 mile radius, and your pocket parks are serving those who are even closer. So as we're looking at these spaces and they're starting to develop, we're always looking at where are they placing these things and where are we planning on placing things in the future. I know that in practice we're always looking at what are those high density areas and how do we ensure that we're serving them. A clear example of that is the master plan that we have in place for Horns Corner Park, which is adjacent to the apartment complexes on Pioneer, just by, what's this cross street? Royal Road.
Kind of semi along those lines, I was curious about if there's anything that's kind of baked in either officially or just kind of a reality of implementation and practice when looking at a development plan for an individual development, working with the developer. They've put out a plan on the space that they're going to allocate and how they plan to use it. And I'm curious about how that might align with other goals outside of that individual development. And I'm wondering if in looking at that, if there's a need in that general area to serve a larger population with a park, is there a process that looks for an opportunity to partner there where maybe a combination, or maybe it's one of those situations where we have this amount of land and maybe there's an opportunity to actually in that case have the city take it over and provide greater services than the developer would if they were doing it not only in the context of meeting the requirement in the context of their individual development for their individual HOA. Again, trying to kind of kill multiple birds with one stone and take the opportunity of the individual situation.
Absolutely. A clear example of that one would be the Paradise Point development, wherein we created a master plan last year that was then given to the developer as this is the plan you need to follow in order to construct the amenities within this park, to make sure that there was that public input, public engagement, to make sure that's reflecting the community's values.
Anything else? I think we're ready to move on. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to draft goal 6.2. This one is all about interconnection and access. So goal 6.2, increase community connectivity and accessibility through an interconnected system of trails. 3 policies nested in there, and would love to hand it back to our commissioners for any comments on these.
Start on the left here. Do we have anything?
As I've brought up multiple times before, on these like interconnected trail systems and everything, I think including in policy, making it a little bit more clear on who is responsible for these sections of trails and everything may be beneficial to the average, like to just the general public. I don't think most communities would necessarily know the average household that they're, responsible for upkeep on like the parks or the trails without, explicitly being told, if they just kind of moved in. So maybe adding something in there to do that.
I think the one thing I'm curious about, and I have a feeling has probably been addressed, so you're probably just going to tell me how you've dealt with this, is I can think of certain interfaces between neighborhoods, and the one that comes to my mind is part of the Clover Hill setup by the high school there, where there's a really nice trail that curves around kind of the southernmost, or second to southernmost development that follows G Creek and then dead ends in a roundabout. But it's not very clear, or I didn't find it very clear where it interfaces going across the street, going across Royal. I'm just curious in general with that type of situation, are there any specific standards, anything in the, maybe in the, I'm not sure where it would fall in, to be honest with you, but I'm just curious if there's anything that directly addresses those challenges in interfacing, again, specifically across like arterials and streets and stuff like that. I always thought signage would be a key thing that would help there too.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's exactly what the engineering standards help specify. And we're actually working with our communications team with the city to create the parks and trails branding and sign standards. So that's a joining document to the engineering standards that helps specify what is the look and feel of these signs. If you go to the national parks, I'm pretty sure all of you could pick out the font, the color, and the style of what those parks look like, and so you can identify what those are. Our hope is that by having standardized signs across the city, you may be visiting a friend in another neighborhood and you see a sign that looks similar to the sign at your trail, which will help identify that that is a space that you can go enjoy.
If I could piggyback on that comment, so signage to me is one thing, but also it's the safety factor. So ensuring there's a safe connection for pedestrians, and that is a good example of an area where there's really no clear safety buffer or anything, and maybe that would come as part of the widening of Royal Road. But when Royal Road is widened, is there a standard that addresses that would cause there to be that type of feature put in place?
It'd be the similar standards to the Hawk signal crossing that you just saw installed by the high school. May not be with the overall apparatus, but there would be some sort of signal across the street there. And we're actively working with the capital projects team to ensure that those things are considered in the development of those projects.
I'll just piggyback off that one. I would encourage you, or maybe you could expand on this, but lots of times we have standards, but maybe there are certain locations where the standards aren't enough. And so like this location, Royal Road there, people obviously speed on that road right now, even with all the potholes and construction, but there's a lot of like blind corners there as well. And so I would hope that the city can have standards maybe for like a normal safe, clearly visible space for cars so that pedestrians can cross. But in certain places, that's not enough, I don't think. And so I don't know where those standards are for us. I don't know that we need to have, giant lights that are crossing over the road everywhere. But certain places, like by the high school, where there is a security concern, a safety concern, I hope that those standards can be there, those advanced standards.
I think that's where some of the technical expertise of the staff that are brought on board really have to step in to help, advocate and press for those, because each of these spaces, while having standards, there's unique aspects of each one of them. So is it how do we control traffic in these spaces? It could be with traffic signals, it could be with roundabouts, it could be with, narrowing roads. There's different ways to go about it. And so I think that's where the process of the capital engineering team of reviewing those options really comes into play.
And pulling this back up to a comp plan policy level, I believe what I'm hearing, and maybe a head nod to confirm, is that we need to bake in some language specifically about safety in these policies. Great. Anything else on 2?
I think we're good. You can go ahead and proceed. Thanks, Ms. Lust.
Let's go on and move ahead to the last of our 3 draft goals here. And this one really gets into what I would call the support system around parks, trails, and recreation. Funding, public involvement, and partnerships. So goal 6.3 is enhance and sustain Ridgefield's parks and recreation system to provide quality recreational opportunities and green spaces for all Ridgefield residents. And then the policy is nested within, like I just mentioned, we have some language around funding, public involvement and support, partnerships, and then relationships with the other planning documents that Mr. Crownhart went through. And again, happy to take any feedback on these policies for the city.
Nothing specific. I just really like the 632, the encouragement and support of the public involvement, which is something that you've been doing, and so I appreciate that and hope that continues. As a resident, I think it's very important to feel like your concerns, specifically when it surrounds like your general area, like your neighborhood, your intimate community, what is being brought. And so I want to say thank you for that future park in the east side, because that's where I live, and it is something that is needed. So thank you.
One thing I'd like to add in is to ensure that maintenance is done on our parks continuously. Specifically, like Abrams Park. I was down there last night for my son's baseball game. A couple different foul balls got hit into the blackberries that are 20 feet by 40 feet. And I'm wondering how many baseballs are in those blackberries, because the city neglects to control the noxious weeds on their parks. And so I think it's important to, keep them clean and, control noxious weeds so that the whole facility can be utilized.
I don't know if anyone knows if those blackberries are native or not, but okay. Yeah, feels like that might be an issue then, perhaps.
One thing I'm curious about is it just kind of came to my mind, the idea of the like adopt a highway program or adopt a road program. Is there anything like that that's been done, or as a model that could be followed, that could be used for the trail system? It seems like it would not only be an opportunity for an entity of whatever kind to take responsibility. And mind you, it might not have really any financial side to it. It might be all about, agreeing on a certain cleanup schedule and maintenance schedule. But it seems like it's also an opportunity to kind of broaden awareness of the trails and whatnot. And I'm just curious if there's anything that either exists that I'm just not aware of, or the opportunity to try and do something like that.
Something we can look into if other jurisdictions have that kind of model. And then I think that could tie back to the support and public involvement policy here in terms of opportunities for volunteerism in our parks and trails.
Well, it also has an opportunity to tie into policies 632 or 631, the first one, dedicated funding, because finding opportunities for those adopt a trail, adopt a park programs do provide financial benefit to the city. Having residents volunteer to support our operations and maintenance means there's operation and maintenance that is not having to be paid for by the city. Labor costs within our parks is by far the most expensive operation and maintenance costs. So finding those ways to engage the public both ties people to those places, builds pride in our community, and gives us opportunities to do that. We've already done that in Davis Park with the flower beds with the Ridgefield Garden Club, and we're currently working on projects to find ways to develop that. So those are definitely housed within these policy options.
So when you talk about maintenance, specifically for parks and trails, I know earlier you said that HOAs are responsible. Is there somewhere where a resident can look to see which park or trail, who maintains it?
So, not in a simple way. I actually have a task on my list coming up for the next year to try and create a map that shows public and versus private parks and trails, to give people something to click on to give them a better idea of, oh, this is a city park, or oh, my HOA or someone else's HOA is responsible for this one.
Because I like how, I know there is a map where it'll tell you which HOA manages and contact information and information about the board. And so I think that would be something that would be helpful. Like, okay, I have a question or concern about, I mean, Abrams is pretty easy, that we know it's managed by the city. But if it was a trail or a park or, what did you call them, pocket parks, how would I know as a resident who I would need to address my concern to? So just an idea.
There's online methods, and we're always happy to take calls. And if it's not our park, we can help alert those who have that. That happens quite often.
Thank you.
I'm hoping that you could address maybe some of the different ways that parks are acquired, and then do we have any plans to maybe partner with developers, since they have to use 25% of the land, or a portion of the land for parks? Would it be possible or feasible to sort of position, if we had city land that we wanted to build a park on adjacent to a development, could we partner with them and have their park sort of, boost up or make a larger city park as some way to acquire additional land to have a bigger park?
Absolutely. Those opportunities do exist, and some of them already exist. Say, for example, the Paradise Point, I keep coming back to that one. But the HOA, or the developer and then the HOA, will actually be dedicating funds to the city every year for the maintenance of that property, despite the fact that it is being dedicated to the city.
A couple minutes ago, we were talking about the whole kind of adopt a trail concept, and it actually triggered a memory that I should have already thought about. My wife works for Underwriters Laboratories, which has been a staple in the Vancouver Camas area for quite a while at this point. And one thing that I participated in alongside her was, and it was something I think that UL was involved in, as well as some kind of state agency or something, and it was basically us going out for a work party. She was on the clock and she was being paid to do it, and it was all about cleaning out some noxious weeds, both blackberries and vines that were choking trees. And I believe that it was, again, not only supported by UL through providing labor that was on the clock, but I think that there was also funding that was involved as well through maybe some program specific to, eradication of noxious weeds or something. So I just wanted to share that thought. That's all I have. I think we're ready to move on.
All right, that was the last of the draft Parks and Recreation goals and policies. So unless any commissioners have any final thoughts on, what we are saying about what parks and trails are in the city of Ridgefield, I think I appreciate the feedback we got from you this evening, and we'll work on incorporating it into our next draft. Thank you.
And Chair, if you wouldn't mind, I I don't get an opportunity to come to this commission often, so I did bring a gift. I wanted to say thank you for letting me come in and talk about parks, because I love doing that. So I have stickers for you. I love Ridgefield Trails, just for all of you.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for joining us this evening. It was a fantastic presentation, and we appreciate you providing the insight and sharing what you're working on.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
So are we ready to move on to the presentation of the Development Code amendments, Ms. Lust?
Yeah, so thank you, Vice Chair. Our second agenda item this evening is our first touch together on the 2025 batch of proposed amendments to the Ridgefield Development Code. So for those of you that have been here for a while, this will sound very familiar, but for folks who haven't been through this process before, once or twice, usually once per year, staff compiles proposed amendments to the development code, and these are based on our experience implementing the code. They're based on feedback we hear from other users of the code, such as folks designing projects throughout Ridgefield, and developers doing projects in Ridgefield. We consider feedback we've heard from public comment during Planning Commission and Council meetings. Of course, we try to consider things that have come up from our Planning Commission and from council members as well. And we kind of package those all together, attempt to put them in categories to make them slightly more digestible, and then we bring them to you. And this year, I'm sort of adding this first step to the process, which instead of just dumping a huge stack of like text amendments in front of you and saying, okay, we're having a public hearing and then making a recommendation, this year we're kind of gonna go through the list of topics first, and I would like from this evening to sort of get a temperature check on some of these things. Is there anything that we've talked about in past meetings or you've heard from the community that you think we should add to this list for consideration? Is there anything on this list where you're looking at it and thinking, wow, I really don't think this is an appropriate time for that? Or are there items on this list where you think that we should be doing more research or looking in different directions before we refine it and bring it back? We kind of generally split the proposed code amendments into two buckets. The first bucket is what we call our housekeeping amendments, and these are clerical. They're not proposing any changes to policy. It really just is fixing mistakes we find in the code in our work. So those are on the list in your packets and on the screen before you, but we're not going to talk about them. It's just to illustrate those places where we found little quick fixes to make. The rest of the proposals do affect policy practice of how we implement the code. So those do merit discussion and attention through the process. So with that, I'm going to kind of go topic by topic in here. I'm not going to read through every line item. I trust that folks have been able to go through the packet and do that, but I'm going to just introduce every topic. Some of these, there are specific reasons why we're bringing the broader topic forward at this time. I'll go through that, and then I will be turning it back to the commission for that discussion. Any feedback on things that are missing, need to be refined or researched more, etc. So with that, the first topic item on our list, Trina, if you could scroll down to sign code amendments. So sign code is something that we get to implement a lot with all of the new businesses opening in Ridgefield. And over the course of our work, our planning staff, as well as the applicants they work with on a very regular basis, have identified areas in the sign code that could use improvement. So this is an area where we've been able to collaborate with our applicants to come up with some potential solutions to issues we've seen out in the field. So with that, I will turn it back to the commission for any sign discussion. Thank you.
Do we have any questions starting on the left for signage?
Ms. Luss, could you clarify on the second line, the one talking about cabinet signs were backlit ones? Is that just saying that you can't have a sign that has lighting in the back that doesn't have something covering the light so you're not staring at a light bulb?
So, sort of. So a cabinet sign they're usually a rectangle. It's like a frame with like a plexiglass, two-dimensional, and that will have, text and logos printed on it. We have a prohibition in the code right now that says backlit cabinet signs are prohibited. There's some conflicting language in other sections of the sign code that says, well, as long as it's just the letters and logos that are illuminated and the rest is opaque, you're good. So this came up for a couple businesses back in October 2024, and we put together a director's interpretation that sort of ruled temporarily in favor of that illuminated lettering and logos but opaque background, and that has been working well, but the purpose of a director's interpretation is to be temporary until the code can be clarified. So the proposal here is first to actually define a cabinet sign. We found that would be helpful, and then say that they can be internally illuminated as long as there's opacity outside of the letters and the company logo.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Ms. Luss, can you, do you know why they were prohibited, or at least part of the code had those types of signs prohibited?
Yeah, that was a request from council a few years back. I think there was some consensus that sign type didn't look as polished as they wanted, is how it got in the code several years ago.
Any more comments? Just to make sure that I'm completely understanding this, on the item we were just talking about, the cabinet signs, so would it be accurate to say that another way to word that would be a sign where it's acting as a mask, essentially, where the only, how was it trying to say that? I mean, I understand the idea is that only thing that's shining through is the actual writing or logo, and the rest is opaque, so that just comes to mind as something that's masked off rather than being a completely permeable face, essentially.
Yeah, it achieves the effect of having like individual illuminated letters on a raceway, but done in a cabinet sign, which is simpler and more cost effective to produce.
Gotcha, that makes a lot of sense. I guess now I think it's almost like a way of getting a similar effect to a neon light where the individual wording is illuminated. Thanks so much for the clarification. I think we're done there, so we can move on to the next section.
All right, the next topic down, very much in the same realm of signs, is commercial site and building design. This is one, you might recall, we actually had a little work session in 2024, just sort of talking about what elements of commercial sites that have been developed in the city do you like? What elements do you think, that didn't quite go how it should have? And we got some really good feedback from both Planning Commission and Council from those conversations. And a lot of that feedback was, well, a lot of what's getting built out there is good, it's working well. But there were some things we picked up, and as with signs, there are things that our staff and our applicants have run into as we're working together to interpret and implement the code that are just a little bumpy and we thought could be improved. So that is the purpose of this section, commercial site and building design. This deals with a variety of things from street frontage design, windows and transparency, color, drive-through queuing, Starbucks, etc. So with that, I will hand it back to you once again, Vice Chair, for any thoughts on commercial site and building design code.
Thank you, Ms. Lust. Start on the right.
I just want to say thank you for including that queuing for the drive-through. I think that will make a big difference when we're considering the development or the commercial development over by Costco. So thanks for including that. I think that's all I had in that section.
Nothing?
I've got a few, Ms. Lust. Number one, the first point in this section, could you address where that came from and maybe just to expand a little bit on the process to include this in here?
Sure. So for those who don't have eyes on the list, the first item here would be a proposal to prohibit smoke shops as a use in central mixed use, which is downtown, waterfront mixed use, and neighborhood commercial zones, which are those little small commercial zones adjacent to residential, as well as under the Ridgefield mixed use overlay, which of course mixes residential and commercial uses. This was a request to be included based on the development of I'm not thinking of the name, House of Smoke in downtown Ridgefield. Heard a lot of feedback once that sign went up that, this isn't what I want to see downtown, and that came from residents as well as our elected and appointed officials. So I'm still working with our city attorney to see what our legal boundaries are on prohibiting that kind of use. But I think we're working on a solution there. I think there are some nuances to that, like we can't prohibit a mini mart as that's a retail use and they're going to sell tobacco items, but we're attempting with this proposal to find a line to walk that would in certain scenarios where you are in a downtown or in a mixed residential and commercial neighborhood, prohibit that specific type of use.
Thank you. And do you recall, I think there was a prohibition at one point on like a liquor store or a liquor license. We had the liquor store downtown, and until Rosie's was going to be built, I think the city might have had some sort of prohibition on issuing a business license to someone who's going to sell liquor, other than like a tavern or a bar. Does that sound familiar? Am I hallucinating?
If it was pre-Rose Hours, I might not have been part of that conversation, but I'd like to look into it because that would be helpful. So thank you.
I'm helpful. Did you hear that? Okay, and then let's see, a couple further down. We've talked about this many times, so please start laughing right now if you'd like. But the section right above the drive-through queue section there, we've got 3 points, and then underneath that it says, when buildings occupy less than the standard 50 to 80% of a site's street frontage, require enhanced landscaping between the site and street to soften the visual impacts. Could you remind us, all of us, what enhanced landscaping means?
Yeah, so typically the outer boundary of a commercial site is required to have a 5 to 10 foot L2 buffer, and what that means is trees at 25 feet, shrubs at 5 to 8 feet, and then lawn or ground cover. and this isn't specifically about drive-throughs, they kind of have their own little thing, but it is a good example because for drive-throughs, we require enhanced landscaping between the drive-through lane and the street. And what we refer people to is the L4 standard or equivalent. L4 standard is basically those trees, shrubs, and ground cover plus like an earthen berm that adds some height. So we accept that as enhanced landscaping. We accept more dense planting as enhanced landscaping. We accept things like landscaping boulders, trellises, those sort of landscape adjacent items that sort of add to the screening density. The goal of the enhancement being enhanced screening, basically.
And can you refresh my memory? Because in the past, we've had an issue with, the L2 or the L4 standards. I think that those standards say that the plants at maturity have to be 5 to 8 feet, for example. But in the past, we've had businesses that have just, basically planted a sapling. And so it's going to take 15 years for it to actually cover up whatever we're trying to.
Yeah, we addressed that in a previous code update fairly recently, but we now have language in the landscape installation subsection about requiring a certain height at installation, not just at maturity.
Great. Excellent. That's all. Thank you.
I actually had pretty much the same question, so he took them, out of my sails, but that's good. That means more people are thinking the same things. The only question I want to add for the first proposed amendment is, like, you already brought up that you guys are seeking guidance on the proposed smoke shop amendment, but while I agree personally with the sentiment here, is this something that should be not brought up at all until, like, in any kind of, like, proposed amendments and until that is figured out, just for legality reasons?
No, this is a draft. It's a working draft. There are lots of items in here and in past code amendments where we seek guidance from our legal counsel to make sure we're not introducing something that contradicts law.
And just to further that one, say this does move forward and is okay in the future, but since this specific incident that is, being addressed is already in motion, is that something that we'd have to add specific wordage on to, like, grandfather or, limit future use or something like that?
So code amendments are never retroactive. So anything that exists. So they only apply to new things going forward.
Thank you.
Apologies, but my iPad code doesn't seem to be working. So can you scroll up just a little bit? I think I saw something in here, but my thoughts are in regards to, it was the evening we talked about our favorite queue, but there was also some testimony regarding loading, and I'm not sure if I saw that in here. So there was a conversation talking about the delivery trucks blocking people for a good amount of time, and so is there anything in here that addresses that?
I do not have that, but thank you for the reminder because I do recall that conversation about delivery trucks and loading. So I'll make a note of that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Lust, back on the enhanced landscaping real quick. Off the top of your head, do you know what percentage of native plants are required to be included in any of that landscaping?
We don't have a percentage. The language is, we have a native plant list. The language says encouraged to use native plants. Do not use prohibited or nuisance plants, and we have lists for those as well.
So we have a list of do not use, and then a list of, these would be great, but there's no requirement.
There's no
that,
percentage.
Okay. Is that something that maybe the city could take a look at?
We can.
Like above 0%
Above
would be
0%.
ideal.
If Planning Commission has any numbers to throw out, I would accept them.
Okay. Well, then, real quick, I would say, I think, I don't know how this could be worded, but I think it should be a high percentage. I don't know what that means exactly, if that's like 50% or 75%. I'm absolutely open to, if a business has a theme where, say, palm trees might be part of their image, as long as they have the right cues in their drive-through, I'm cool with it. So I think that's fine if it's sort of part of the branding, but if it's just the plants that are in the development that are just supposed to look nice, I don't see why we wouldn't have 100% as the standard for those areas. But there's likely a difference, or I suspect there's a difference between, say, putting a palm tree right on the specific, on the footprint of the building, so to speak, compared to like the community landscaping of the development. So maybe you wouldn't even maybe have to have a difference there. I don't know, but if it's not branding, I think it should be 100%.
Yeah, we'd be able to differentiate between landscaping that is required to like meet the percentage of landscaping on the site versus other stuff that they're adding in because that's part of their thing.
Yeah, because palm trees are cool, but they're not. Yeah. Okay.
I would continue the same idea. Yes.
I definitely wanted to echo the same sentiment, and again, personally, I would love to just be able to say 100%, but I know that we have to find a balance with such things, and I'm very curious about the idea of looking at other communities and what they've found has been a successful implementation of an aggressive standard, but nonetheless one that felt like it was realistic and had some proper allocation for dealing with exceptions like the palm tree example given. The other thing I wanted to throw in that's kind of in the same context, and this actually was something I think I personally brought up in that meeting you referenced, Ms. Lust. That was about, I think it's on the east side, kind of along the large Dollar Tree set of developments where instead of it just being your standard green space with a straight sidewalk on the side, there's some curved stuff going on, and I don't know how much that was driven by just someone's kind of whim or fancy, or whether it had to do with accommodating a couple existing trees, or regardless, I find that kind of thing, especially since I think there's even a couple park benches there, as just a stellar example of how something can genuinely stand out and make a difference. And I would love to see some language, at least entertained or investigated, to directly encourage that. I mean, obviously it can happen, just like anything can happen, but it would be great to see something that developed standards so that it's not just someone trying to do something on their own that's kind of just going off into the weeds, but while providing standards for it, also provide some kind of encouragement to try and see that happen more often in a way that makes sense to the city. And that's all I have. Thank you.
If I could just ask a quick question, going back to the native vegetation and such. So reflecting on a former commissioner's concern regarding voting on a similar issue, I'm not sure I have the technical understanding or knowledge to say that that's a good thing or if it should be 100% or what. So does the city have a resource, a master gardener, or anyone who could speak in regards to what are, it sounds great, native sounds great, but why is it important, or what is it? I'd just like some more education on that topic, I suppose.
Yeah, we can seek out some outside expertise on that topic.
Just to further that thought, there are a couple items that I thought about previously, like grass. A lot of grass types are actually not native. So just some considerations when writing it, like things like grass types and stuff, so that we don't end up, making it impossible to landscape a lawn or something like that. While I agree that most native, grasses and stuff like that do actually root considerably better. It may prohibit, put huge boundaries in ways of developers and everything to do lawns. And then also just to make sure that there's language in there that doesn't make it so that residents, if they choose to want to have some kind of non-native plant in there, for, to bring in bees or butterflies or, whatever, bugs, whatever, that it doesn't prohibit them from doing so if they so choose on their own land.
I believe we're ready for the next section, Ms. Lust. Thank you so much.
All right, so the next section is another pretty hefty one, housing amendments. So obviously, this is something that we've talked about a lot with Planning Commission. It's something that comes up in our work a lot, especially as people are looking at, okay, what can we do on this property? If I purchase this property, what could develop on it, be that a many acre property or a downtown parcel. So, and we're also in here have some state legislation to respond to in our code updates. So there are a number of topics in here, including accessory dwelling units, duplex, triplex, as well as narrow lot products in the medium density 16 zone. So with that, again, I'll turn it back to the commission for any questions and discussion on this one.
We'll start on the left side this time. Do we have any questions or comments? Anything on the right side?
Well, I just wanted to bring to attention that the ADU, I appreciated the comment down at the bottom that explains why this amendment is needed. And again, it's to help meet those standards that the city is trying to reach regarding housing and I like even the comment, like the strategy we have been using is it's not regarding like the impact fees, like and how we can help maintain or increase the number of ADUs that are being built and submitted. And I have heard some comments in my community from neighbors or friends that, yeah, it is challenging and it is just as expensive as, building a home. So I appreciate that accommodation. That's all.
I don't have anything either. I think we're good to move on, Ms. Lust.
All right, we'll keep scrolling. Next one's short, but important and ties back to what Mr. Crownhart was telling you about his recent work on updates to the Parks and Trails engineering standards. We have Parks and Trails standards in our code as well, specifically in the planned unit development section. So those are the lion's share of residential developments built in the city are planned unit developments. And they have some pretty stringent Parks and Trails standards to get to that 25% and to create interconnection. Really the updates here are to the language we use in our code to make sure it's consistent with the language that Parks is using in their code. And then to just add some language to strengthen those statements about connectivity within developments and to neighboring trail systems.
Do we have any comments or questions? I think one thing that I wanted to express, and I know it's hard for us as commissioners to escape our first reference, which is our own community and our own, what impacts our life directly. What certainly happened in our community, and I've certainly seen many cases of, is that a developer in the process of meeting this requirement and doing it in a way which is completely understandable is most beneficial to them and has the least negative impact on them while still making the development look good, doesn't always best serve the community. So I'm just kind of curious in the context of code and the things that impact the ultimate decision, approval, and enforcement process. If there's anything in how these plans are reviewed and approved that tries to look at it from the lens of how the individual community is being served. Like in ours, we have an especially large area that's this kind of wetland area, and there's a paved trail going through it, but we basically have almost no space for kids to do anything or any shared space, and no real thought was put into that. And it was a development that was heavily geared towards families, so there just wasn't something kind of, we feel that it broke down there. So I'm just kind of curious if there's anything that addresses that.
Yeah, in terms of actual code language, not necessarily. In terms of our process, yes. With having actual parks staff now and integrated into our development review process, we're having someone who's really dedicated to looking at those things and thinking about how will it work, which we found really valuable on the recent projects that he's been able to get involved with.
Last chance on this one? I think we're ready to move on, Ms. Les, thanks.
All right, next item is critical areas and native plants. I have noted all of the helpful comments on native plants, so I'll make sure to integrate those moving forward as part of this proposal. The other items on here, two of them are really just making it easier to know what our code says, so I'll touch on those first. Native plant list applicability. We apply it to every project, but if you squinted at the code sideways, you could maybe argue that it doesn't, so we are strengthening that to make sure that, yes, every new development needs to comply with the native plant code. And the other one is just strengthening the language around protection of Oregon white oaks. Those are a habitat conservation area. Again, in practice, we are always treating them as such, and our code does lead you there, but you have to piece together a little logic to get there. So we just want to make it really clear for users of the code that that is the case. And then the first item on this section is really around the definition of a critical area and making sure we're complying with state statutes and best available science from our resource agencies, such as WDFW and Department of Ecology, when it comes to the definition of a critical area, to make sure exemptions are what they should be, basically. Any thoughts on those three items?
Start on the right here.
Can you speak on strengthening the reference to Oregon white oaks? You
Yep.
mentioned protecting them. They're already protected. However, you are allowed to, in some circumstances, remove and mitigate. Are you guys not going to be allowing that?
No, so the regulations would not change. We follow what Department of Fish and Wildlife publishes as best available science, which prioritizes, of course, preservation, but then does outline steps for mitigation in cases where that is part of the proposal. So we're still following that same guidance, having the same standards. The issue we've seen in our code is just the phrase used is habitat conservation areas, which if you go through the definition includes oak habitats as well as individual oaks per what WDFW says, but our code doesn't say the word oak, it just says habitat areas, so you have to be able to make that connection from one definition to the other, and we want to say oaks, so it is crystal clear what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
I'm glad you just said that, Ms. Lust. 2 or 3 years ago, we were looking at a similar issue, and I requested that the city staff consider not using the name Oregon white oak and to change it to either Ridgefield white oak or Washington white oak. And I'm wondering if you could expand on the city staff's discussion and when that's going to be implemented. Thank you.
think the guy I learned about in high school biology who did all the taxonomy, I think he supersedes us on that, but can bring it to management. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions down on the left? To be honest, I have one comment, and maybe it would have been more appropriate to have made it a couple sections ago, but it could apply here. One thing that's come to my mind, and this is just mainly due to some of the interesting associations I have through my wife, certainly one common problem, I mean, it's everywhere, but especially in the United States, and California is especially famous for this, everybody wants their picture-perfect green lawn, which are more often than not extremely wasteful from a water resource usage and a maintenance issue, and so many people, regardless of what their HOA is or isn't doing, is using all kinds of chemicals to try and, again, get the result that they want, even when it's kind of having to go extra mile in maintenance. But there actually has been extensive work done in Oregon. And there's a company that does nothing but deal with alternative ground cover. They put together seed mixes that are, I want to say, are a high percentage of native plants. And the basic result is you have a resilient ground cover that you can walk and play on. It does not require any watering during the season. It does not. You can mow it, but you don't have to. It's a mix of different clovers and some native low-growing grasses, I believe, a mix of different stuff. But I love the idea of something attempting to, again, it would be hard to try and make a requirement for that kind of thing, but certainly from a standpoint of trying to encourage it, maybe with some kind of incentive. And again, I don't really know how that might fit into this, but I just wanted to bring it up while it was on my mind, that I think there's a lot that can be done there. I mean, I'm never really been happy with my lawn in front of the house, even though the HOA takes care of it, but we're definitely going to go alternate in the back with one of these things, but it's just something on my mind. Thank you. Anything else? I think we're ready to move on, Ms. Lester.
All right, that makes a pretty good segue because the next section here is water utility amendments. So we're not really talking about the content in this, but City Council very recently adopted a water conservation strategy that is focused on usage. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to go into the details of that strategy because I'm not the expert on it, but I can send out a link as a follow-up if commissioners are interested. It should be online as well. But really, these amendments are to make sure that water conservation strategy is basically in the list of things that we can enforce through code enforcement. Any questions on that?
It's not really a question, I guess, maybe just for clarification. So when you're saying enforcing on water, that would be like, are you saying like HOAs can't require that residents keep green lawns, or are you saying like a resident, we've noticed you run your water too long, and that's an like, what are you saying enforcement?
So this is specific to the water conservation strategy, which does outline 5 phases of water stress, basically. And there is no enforcement until we get to stage 5, which is like the emergency water availability is not there stage. Then you do not water your lawn, and this would give our code enforcement staff the ability, if we're in a stage 5 water emergency and someone is watering their lawn, to issue a fine, basically. That doesn't kick in until we reach a level of stress to our water system that, has not happened.
Yeah.
That's, we haven't had stage 5 days since we've been tracking. But we do have the ability now, if we get to that point, to say, no, this is not a day when you're watering your lawn, and to enforce that is the strategy here.
The only reason I bring that up, I would just stress including in anything like that some kind of consideration to HOAs that may choose to fine residents in addition to any fines that might be levied to someone. I don't know what that would look like, but making sure that an HOA can't fine somebody because you fine somebody, and it's just like a back and forth.
Noted, thanks. Part of the implementation of the water conservation strategy is our staff is going to be reaching out to HOAs and educating them on what the requirements are. So we're hoping that ends up being a partnership.
Yeah, and is there any kind of resources available to people who are new to HOA or to these kind of communities on like how much they should water their lawns for square footage or anything?
I'll have to check with our team on that. I know the folks that have been working on the water conservation strategy have, in their research, put some resources together. So that's something I can look into for you.
I would highly suggest like putting that out there because I know a lot of people are not privy to that knowledge, and if we're trying to help that might alleviate people who just don't know. Thank you.
Just a comment on that. It might be tricky to do because there's different types of sprinkler heads and how they water. There are newer ones that are very efficient and spray as if it's like a light rain. So they are meant to water your lawn for 30 minutes versus like your fan sprinklers that you water for 10 minutes. So it might be just kind of tricky in my point of view.
Well, I agree. You could put general usage though of, a lawn requires, no more than, 10 gallons or whatever, I don't know what the number is, but like whatever that is per, a day or whatever. So that people aren't just doing like 35 minutes every day for, needless or something. But yes.
Any more comments, questions? All right, Ms. Luss, thanks. We can move on.
All right, we've made it to the last topic, which is the little things that didn't fit in other sections, miscellaneous amendments. There are 4 items on here, and if the commission has any questions or comments on them, I would be happy to hear your feedback.
Any feedback from the commission?
Ms. Luss, does the city have any data on how many dogs are unlicensed?
I don't know how we would get that data if they don't have a license, but I can ask our enforcement folks. If
There is an
that's-
enforcement person, and hopefully they don't know where I live. I didn't know that dog licenses were required. How many people, I mean, I think if you went to the dog park and took a survey, I don't think anybody would know.
Our code enforcement is complaint-based, so we're not going out and asking people. This is also mostly catered towards like kennels, where you have 4 or more dogs. I know there is language in there about license required for individual dogs, and yes, it is required. It is through our police department.
Yikes. Okay. Well, my dog is a very good boy, so he's not a problem. But I'll take care of this tomorrow.
If Rooster doesn't bite anyone, we probably won't hear about him, so.
I mean, I would agree with Commissioner Flynn. I would say 90% or more of people probably don't know about this because I don't know where it would be located to even see or know if you weren't looking for it somewhere. Is there a reason? I mean, I get why for kennels, because like you're trying to, eliminate, inhumane kennels and stuff like that, or, kind of. But is there a reason for like, a non-dangerous general dog that you'd have to have this?
I do not know. I could look into that and provide that information. I didn't do that research for this amendment. It's really, the purpose is to make the numbers line up with the definition of a kennel, which I believe comes from the state. So yeah, we had a weird situation in the code where there was no requirement for exactly 4 dogs. It was like less than 4 or greater than 4. So the purpose of this is to clean that up, not to create any new requirements. But yes, for public information, dog licensing is through the police department. It is required. It is matching the RCWs, and I am happy to ask around more about the why behind that.
Are you suggesting that I should not get a dog license tomorrow?
I'm not going to tell you what to do.
Okay, that's fine.
I'd like to speak about cats.
I do not want to talk about cats at all, ever. I don't know if the dog license revenue is in the state or in the city's financial statements, but I'm wondering if for our next meeting, if you could let us know how much revenue comes in or how many applicants are there for dog licenses. I'm very, very curious to know how many criminals are walking the street.
Yeah, that
right
can
now.
be my fun fact.
2-legged and 4-legged.
That'll be our fun fact for July.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, and is there anything about cats? It's just specific to dogs?
Dogs.
Okay, so if you have 4 or more cats, you're not considered a cat kennel?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But
I
I don't, this is, like I said, I am not super familiar with this code section. It's in here to kind of fix a accounting error, but I'm happy and now curious to look more into it.
I want to
so
keep poking
thank
at
you.
it. The very first one under housekeeping, if we go all the way back up, dangerous dog license fee. So there's a separate license fee for dangerous dogs. And what's a dangerous dog? I'm assuming you don't know this, so it's more of a rhetorical question.
That's a dog with a bite history.
So it's not a specific breed, it's one with like a criminal history.
No, that's one that has like bit someone or bit another dog and is a little criminal, and it's been reported and documented by our police department. Part of the requirement, if that happens, is to obtain a dangerous dog license.
And its third bite and gets put away for life or something?
There's a continuum of steps before that happens,
Okay.
and one of them is getting the dangerous dog license.
Okay.
I'm going to start by apologizing for the unavoidable reality that whenever this kind of happens, and this is becoming kind of a bit of a character mislush, and again, I apologize that it's unavoidable that we open up the doors because it gives us ideas, it generates thoughts in our minds. The one thing I want to add to the discussion that is unavoidable because we're dealing with what a lot of people consider a crisis in our neighborhood is a population of stray cats. So with that in mind, I'm just wondering, or I guess I'm requesting that the staff look into if there's anything that exists in the code for dealing with that on any kind of scale. We're basically even dealing with people that are hammering our HOA, trying to demand that they deal with this problem on the HOA's dime and totally make it go away when it's kind of isolated to certain areas of our neighborhood, it seems, or I'm just curious about the topic in general.
Noted, thanks.
Unless we have anything else, I believe that's it, Ms. Lust. And I know you are looking for a motion on this?
Nope, this
That's right.
was just going through the topics and getting feedback, which we did, and thank you very much for participating in that. We'll continue to refine these before we do bring them back eventually for hearing and recommendation to council. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Ms. Lustin, for humoring our continuous comments and diversions into native plant land. It's a passionate topic for some of us, and it's probably not something we'll ever completely let go. But it is time now for our second public comment period. So we'll go ahead and bring that to order. If anyone's requesting to speak to the commission, they may request to speak at this time. This would be on any topic not covered by a public hearing, though we are obviously late in the meeting, so that doesn't fully apply. If you are Online, you can use the raise hand feature, and the clerk will send you permission to unmute your microphone. If you're on the phone, press *9 to raise hand and press *6 to mute and unmute. So we will now open up the public comment period. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have anyone online or locally that wants to make any public comments? Final call for comments from the public. All right, we'll go ahead and close the second public comment period. All right. Staff reports, Ms. Lust?
Sure, I don't have much to report this month, but I do want to put it on everyone's radar that next month being July, our regular scheduled meeting is the 2nd. I know a lot of folks go out of town for the 4th, so if you know you're not going to be available, please let Trina and I know as soon as possible so we can get an idea of whether or not we'll have quorum next month. Thank you.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on then to reports from the commissions. We'll go ahead and start on the right.
I wanted to highlight that the city set out the proclamation for Pride Month for the month of June. I also attended the Union Ridge Parade yesterday, and I thought that was so neat. It's the last year that I have a participant in the parade, so it was extra special for me. Ridgefield High School has their graduation this Friday, so I think that's also a great milestone for a lot of these seniors to be able to walk with their class and on to the next chapter. Green Bag is on the 14th, so reminding our community residents to, if they are interested or willing to donate non-perishable food to Green Bag. I attended our Ridgefield School District strategic planning session, and I thought that was very interesting and very well thought out. It was a long session, but it did provide residents, community members, parents, educators an opportunity to provide their input on how they want the district to move forward. And just a shout out to all the fathers out here, upcoming Father's Day. And yeah, I hope you spend it well. That's all I got.
I just want to thank you and Mr. Crownhart for the presentations. Everything was great tonight.
Same. It was good to see Mr. Crownhart here. I did a good job, and thanks to the city staff and members of the public for coming. The city's online videos that talk about a lot of different things are pretty cool. And especially the one that Katie's in at the high school with the crosswalking. I think that should be blasted 1,000 times a day on the city website. There's still some people who don't understand what a red light means in town. Probably cat owners. And I'm kidding. Cats are lovely. They're lovely. And I'm thankful to the mayor for proclaiming Pride Month. I think that's a very important thing, and it's unfortunate that there's so many negative Nancys on Facebook. They should watch the traffic video, the crosswalk video, to learn how to be a little bit nicer to our neighbors. And it's Raptor season, so that's exciting. One last thing on high school and graduation. Today was the day where the seniors went around to the other schools. So all the kids in all the grades get to see the seniors walk through the halls or walk around the outside. And it's a really, it's an awesome thing that we do here in town. And so certainly congratulations to those seniors. They're not all leaving tomorrow or on Saturday, but that type of a thing really builds community, I think. And I know just from the youngster in my household, he loved seeing the seniors come through. He got a big hug from one that he's friends with, and it's a great thing that the school district does and the city does there. So congrats to all the seniors.
I would like to follow that with, again, all the wind out of my sails taken there. He's a tough guy to follow. Thank you, staff, for the presentation. I learned quite a few things, apparently, about dogs, too. And I would also like to highlight the red light thing. I do think that we should keep maybe putting that video out there, because I personally, two things that came up today. One, the extra traffic on Carty Road because of the road work. I almost got hit today by people flying through there. And then, I watched multiple people drive through the red light today, as a kind of like a California stop. All right, they're gone, I can go, kind of ignoring the thing. But I do think it's good because I live right across from there basically, and I routinely see people not, I've never seen anything super close, but yeah, we definitely, that was great to put in. Raptors, I'm super excited. I've been going to those. We're 2 so far. We have a famous little baby raptor now, so he's been very popular. While albeit the hot dog lines have been insane lately. And I wanted to add for the meeting on, you said July 2nd, which is that week, I will get back to you, but there's a very high likelihood that I will be in I won't say high likelihood. There's a good likelihood that I'll be in the police academy at that point, so I might not be able to make it. So that's all I have.
My topic has to do with maybe a question, Ms. Lutz, in regards to the greatly needed southern entrance point for the city from I-5 at Battleground exit to Hillhurst. Two things on that. One is I'm assuming that I think his title would be editor emeritus of the Columbian in the article where he talked about it connecting to Royal. I'm assuming that is still intended to connect to Hillhurst. Would that be correct?
So there hasn't been a final alignment selected yet. We're actually working this week on getting a contract finalized with a consultant team to work with our staff to continue the planning study that kind of started during COVID to analyze different potential alignments for the Ridgefield I-5 South connector, ultimately select a preferred alternative that can then go through the environmental permitting process.
Right. And my memory from that time and the 5 alternatives shown was that most of them connected with Hillhurst and maybe one connected to Carty Road. But so the Royal Road, I think, was maybe just a misstatement.
So the alignments explored during the first phase of the project a few years ago did largely connect to Hillhurst, which then of course connects up to Royal, with one of the alternative alignments, yes, going more north than west and hitting Carty Road. So you're correct that the primary connection explored was to Hillhurst.
Okay. And, I appreciate the comment we received from the public in the written letter, basically supporting the need for that. And you talk about a consultant perhaps being engaged with on the topic. Is there anything that the Planning Commission can do? Is there anything, can a working group be formed with the city to help propel this topic, which involves multiple jurisdictions?
Yeah, so part of the process will be outreach. And the focus of that outreach will, of course, be property owners potentially affected by that South I-5 connector. But as we're developing the scope of the project, that is something I can look into. It's definitely more of a transportation project, and it is largely outside of the city limits, which makes it, it is multi-jurisdictional, but that's something that I can keep an eye on moving forward as to what opportunities to engage there are for this group and for Ridgefield residents in general.
Yeah, and I think I'm really My belief is because it is multi-jurisdictional, it almost seems like we need a cheering group, I call it a working group of the city that basically would engage with these other partners in the locally and at the state level and perhaps even federal level to propel the idea forward. So thanks. That's all I had.
For myself, don't really have anything exciting to report. Nothing new on the robotics team front, other than the passing of the guard to new leadership, which is a big part of the process. I would point out, though I don't remember any specifics I can share at this time, a big part of the robotics team is outreach. That STEM outreach is a huge part of the mission. It's also used as a fundraising source as well, so that's definitely a factor. And during the summer, there will be at least one STEM camp that they'll be putting on in July. I think it's the second week of July. And there might be a few other events along those lines as well. And I would just kind of share this information because it's a story that we're hearing from a lot of different sectors and organizations. We're dealing with a funding shortfall going into next year due to funding that ultimately came from a federal level that has been defeated, has been withdrawn. And therefore is causing funding that ultimately was funneled through the state to individual teams to evaporate. So we're dealing with, I think, almost a $5,000 to $9,000 funding gap over what we were expecting. So it's just wanted to share that challenge, and its challenge, again, I'm sure is not singular. And again, I wanted to thank the staff. It was wonderful to hear the parks presentation today and appreciate all the work you guys have put into all of this and humoring our comments and sidetracks. But I do not have anything else, so I believe we are now adjourned.